Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Jan Hicks, and I am interviewing Mr. Foster Renwick, who is a World War II veteran as part of the Augusta Richmond County Historical Society and Library of Congress World War II Veteran History Project. With me today is Rosie Herman, Foster's daughter, on the camera, Lynn Renwick, Foster's wife, and Mr. Fred Gailey, who is the project director of the History Project. Well, good morning, Foster.
Good morning.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Midwest. Basically, I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We moved to St. Paul, Minnesota when I was very young. Then we moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Then we moved to Bedford, Indiana, and to Indianapolis, Indiana. And then when my dad passed away, we moved back to Minneapolis, and where we had lived for approximately 10 years before the war.
Would you describe yourself as a farm boy or a city boy?
City boy, I guess.
Did you have family, men in your family, uncles, grandfather, serve in the military?
I had an uncle who served in the military. My father did not. He was an engineer and got a deferment for World War I. And he was the engineer in charge at Camp Grant and Camp Custer. One was in Grand Rapids and one in Rockford, Illinois.
Mm-hmm. You decided to enlist in the Army.
Yes, I had a draft number that had the war not intervened, had our attack on Pearl Harbor not intervened. I probably would have been drafted in about October of 1942, but when Pearl Harbor came, and war was subsequently declared on December 8th, I volunteered on the 9th of December 42, but there were so many who were volunteering, they more or less just took our names, and I didn't hear from them again until March. I think it was March 19th, I believe is right. And at that time I enlisted as a private on leave. Not on leave, but on furlough. And I didn't become active until the 1st of May when I went to Santa Ana pre-flight in Santa Ana, California.
By then you were 22 years old.
I was 22, yes.
And what were you doing at the time that you were then eventually called up?
I was working at a department store part-time and in a machine shop part-time. And I was going to school part-time in the evenings for part of that period right before I enlisted.
And when you enlisted, you knew what you wanted?
Yes, I wanted to be a pilot in the Army Air Corps. I didn't want anything else. No Navy, no Coastie, no navigation, no bombardier, a pilot in the Army Air Corps.
How confident were you were going to be able to do that when you
Not
raised
very
your
confident
hand?
when I saw the lineup of people on December 9th at the Minneapolis recruiting office. Not very confident. There were hundreds who were lined up in the Army line, and I would say over half of them there were wanting to go to pilot school in the Army Air Corps. It was the thing to do, the place to go, and they were getting all the publicity prior to the war. And the other thing, the instigator of it was, of course, if you didn't volunteer for something, and you were drafted, you had no control over where you'd wind up. That wasn't a very happy thing to look forward to.
What did your parents think about this?
As a matter of fact, I didn't tell my mother I had joined until after I had joined, because I knew she'd be all shook up. And she was. But after a few days, she understood that if I didn't make a choice, why somebody else would make a choice for me.
And you'd lost your dad by this point. Did you have brothers?
I had 2 brothers. One was still in high school, and one was deferred because of a hearing accident that he has a child who was hit by a bus, and he lost the hearing in 1 year, so he was 4 after. That was his draft status.
But your mom got used to this idea then?
Yeah.
Where did you go for your initial boot camp?
Well, it wasn't called boot camp, it was called pre-flight, and that was Santa Ana, California. That was the West Coast Training Center for the Army Air Corps.
So you knew when you raised your hand you were going to get the Army Air Corps?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
and you were selected for a commission. And tell us about the training cycle that you went through then to get your wings.
Well, it was a kind of a mini West Point. Our commanding officer of the base was a West Pointer, but we were all civilians too, and it was a strict environment, but probably not nearly as strict as West Point. But it was enough so that we understood that we were in the Army and who the officers were and who was boss and who was running the thing and so on. So it was good training. They got us all whipped into shape. If you didn't get whipped into shape, it was bye-bye. They weren't afraid to wash you out at all.
If you washed out at some point, did you get recycled back to the front, or was that it?
No, you got to recycle back into the ground forces. Oftentimes, as flight training went on, if you were washed out, you had a chance to get into navigation school or bombardier school. If you're real officer material, but just were unable to grasp flying, that was one of the big tricks that they wanted fast learners because the war was on, and I mean, that was an old expression, there was a war on, but you had to learn and learn fast. And so if a man was good officer material and so on, they might put him in any number of ground jobs, supply, finance, anything, or even to bombardier or navigation schools.
You told me that you graduated on February 6, 1943, trained to fly. You got your wings.
In Marfa, Texas, we were in the first class. By the way, we were in the second class at Fort Stockton, Texas for primary, the second class at Pecos, Texas for basic training, and the first class at Marfa, Texas for advanced training.
What could you fly at that point?
Well, our first plane were Stearman's, PT-17s, primary trainer 17s, Stearman's. At that time they were made by Boeing, and that was a biplane, a fabric covered biplane. We flew those for 60 hours. Then we had 60 hours in a BT, Basic Trainer 13. It was made by Vultee Aircraft, and we called them Vultee vibrators because there were much more aircraft than Stearman was. And then if you were still around and hadn't been washed out, we flew in advanced, we flew AT-17s. The civilian name for the plane was Cessna Bobcat, the family car of the air. And that's what we flew for advanced training.
These all very small aircraft by
Yes,
comparison to what you...
by what you see now.
Did you steadily get a larger aircraft, or did you go straight to the transport?
No, each phase of training, primary, basic, and advanced, each one of those was 2 months. So I had 3 months of pre-flight training at Santa Ana, then 2 months in primary, 2 months in basic, and 2 months in advanced. And I graduated February 6, 43, and got my much coveted wings. And a second lieutenant, big shiny gold bars.
Definitely.
Big stuff.
When did you find out you were going to be a transporter?
I went to C-47 transition school immediately upon graduation, as did most of our class. We graduated about 130 in our class, I think. But the 130 was the remnants of nearly 300 who started out in primary, because they kept washing out about 40 to 50% in primary, and then another 40 to 50% in basic, and they washed out a few in advance, just a handful, maybe 4 or 5 in advance. But that was about it. And
when you graduated, did some of those go off to be fighter pilots, bomber pilots,
very
transport,
few
or
went
how?
into anything but troop carrier. Troop carrier was, this was probably planned at the time, the invasion of Normandy, and they were going to try it out in North Africa and Sicily and Italy and so on before the big show on June 6, 43, which ultimately turned out to be June 6, 44. But I went to what they call C-47 transition school for about a month and a half at Bergstrom Air Force Base or Army Air Base in in Austin, Texas. And then I went to Lawson Field and joined the 50th Troop Carrier Squadron, and that was part of the 314th Troop Carrier Group.
I imagine that C-47 looked pretty big after
It
those.
did. It was a big aircraft at the time.
Describe the C-47 to us and the capabilities
It's
it
very
had.
simple. Do you know what a DC-3 is? This was a D3C with green paint. Only it had an extra door, a removable door for the paratroops to jump out. They had the one hinge door that would open out, but they had a removable frame of a door over here, so when the paratroop jumped out, armed with rifles this long and grenades and you know what, but the average carried between 120 and 140 pounds of gear besides their own body weight when they jumped out. So before the parachute drops, even the practice drops and so on, they would remove the fixed door, if you will. So the opening was probably 6 feet wide, maybe 7 feet wide.
Did you ever do any rear drop, or were they all out of the
No,
sky?
they didn't have any rear drops at the time.
Did they static line, or were these free jumps?
No, they were all a static line. Stand up and hook up was the word from the jump master. After we would flash on a red light in the cockpit. There was always a T at the drop zone, depending on how it got there. It was usually dropped by what they call pathfinder units, who flew in maybe an hour or a half hour before the lead plane of the troop carrier units, and they dropped out a few paratroops to make a T out of torches that you could see at night and in the daytime.
You could detect the
These
wind
guys,
direction.
incidentally, I was never in a Pathfinder unit, but these guys have got to be among the heroes of World War II, because they went in there to be paratroops, and the pilots who flew them in. It was a sneak attack, sneak deal all the way. The pilots would drop off about a half a dozen of these guys, everything quiet, shut the engines off to hold down the advance warning as much as possible, let the troops out and start it up and get up, head for home as fast as you could. But can you imagine these paratroops dropping down into unknown territory? No, in France, and I suppose in Sicily and Italy, where we dropped the others too, they probably had underground help that was all that we never heard anything about. But it was very silent, very quiet. It was unbelievable.
Did you have any self-defense weapons on your aircraft?
Yes, I did. I had a 45. And I'm here to tell you
on your
and
hip.
anybody else who will listen to me that I couldn't hit the wall with a 45.
From
But
inside the
I
building?
had it strapped to my side.
But your aircraft was not equipped with any self-defense at
Nothing.
all. Did you have escort when you'd go drop your troops?
No.
That was,
We did have in the Operation Market Garden, and that was the Holland Airborne Invasion, we called it. We had one P-51. It was flying underneath us. We were flying in at about 600 feet, and there were flight towers all over. It could stop shooting us, and this P-51 came around, but the minute he was gone, they started shooting at us again. Incidentally, one side note about the P-51, I went to a family reunion in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I met a fellow there by the name of Ed Mance. It turns out he was the pilot of the P-51. I didn't know it at the time. Talk about small world apartment. He was a third cousin of mine or something. He was in the family, but I had never even heard the name before. But he saw our plane go down. I don't mean my plane, but a plane in our squadron. We lost only one plane that day. But it was actually amazing. I couldn't believe it. We were hugging each other like long lost brothers.
now you were in what unit, Foster?
I was in the 50th Squadron of the 314th Troop Carrier Group.
And describe this unit. Describe the men in this unit, if you would.
Well, each squadron at peak strength probably had around 50 pilots and 2 200 enlisted men. And so the total group of 4 squadrons was around 1,000 people. And well, we had, besides the pilots and a few navigators, we had about 5 or 6 navigators in the squadron itself. And we had a supply officer and an adjutant, and of course a commanding officer and an operations officer. And intelligence officer. And that was about it for the officers. Of course, we had a mess officer too.
Was this exclusively C-47s?
Exclusively at that time, yes. Matter of fact, all through World War II, the Air Transport Command, which was kind of a cousin operation of ours, had C-46s and C-47s. But troop carrier alone, at least in the North Africa and European theaters, was strictly C-47s. If you add those for troop carrier command, and then the RCAF and the RAF C-47s, they didn't call them that, they had another name, but they were DC-3s. You had approximately, at peak strength, I think, after the invasion, I think probably by the end of 1944, in England alone we had 2,500 C-47s. Because we had about 20 groups. That's about right. I heard that after the war from a squadron historian, that we had the peak strength of C-47s at the end of 1944 was around 2,500.
You formed up, your unit formed up at Fort Benning, did you say?
They actually formed up at Sedalia Army Air Force Base in Warrensburg, Missouri, before I joined the outfit. But they had moved to Fort Benning, Georgia, about a month before I got out of flight school. So I went immediately there to Lawson Field, was the air base there.
You had all your own organic maintenance in the squadron? The enlisted men were actually worked on the aircraft?
Oh, yes,
mechanics,
sure,
and
yes.
all belonged right to the squadron?
Absolutely.
Pretty important enlisted men.
We looked out for them. We watched out for them.
How was the status of the maintenance of your aircraft? Did you have missions that were aborted for maintenance issues?
Very, very few. Very few. We had great crews. Great crews.
Describe the men in your unit. I assume they were young men, mostly single?
Yes, that's about, well, we had some married guys too, but I would say most of them, I don't, on a percentage standpoint, I don't know how much it would be. Most all the guys I palled around with were all single. They had a few married guys. After the invasion of Normandy, the commanding officer, because it was a howling success, he arranged it with our group commander so that all the married guys could go home for 2 weeks and come back to the States. So for a period there of about a month, because they were staggering them out, our squadron strength was not up to snuff, which meant that we were flying every day. I was flying every day because I was single.
Did you fly the same aircraft every time, or did you just...
I flew a total of 3 aircraft altogether in my 2 years. And I remember the numbers very well and the crews and so on. As a matter of fact, the first airplane I had was the Wild Hare, and that's kind of another story in itself. On April the 6th, in a crash over in Belgium. I wasn't in the plane, but it's now been made into a hunting blind. The fuselage, I'll show you the picture, the hunting blind. And that's in the same area that these people had this ceremony honoring our squadron, honoring the Americans. The first Sunday of every April, had been doing it since 1947.
In general terms, what was the mission of this unit? What was the
It was
scope.
called troop carrier, so you might get the impression that's all we did was carry troops, but that was really a small part of our job. It was not only to bring paratroops in to combat, it was evacuating wounded, and that I really felt, still feel that was the most important thing we did, was evacuating the wounded, get the boys off the front lines, because they had all these temporary airstrips over there. And not every time, but most times we would fly supplies in, munitions, rations, what have you, in up near the front lines, and it would be near a hospital or a MASH unit, and they would load up the planes and we would fly them back to areas, to bases down near London, where the hospitals were, and medical care and that kind of thing.
I understand you had a little bag of goodies that you'd save up, your rations and cigarettes.
Yes, matter of fact, we and our crew made it a point to get a hold of all the chewing gum, candy, cigarettes, you name it, all the goodies that we could to pass out to these guys, because I still feel very strongly about it. These guys really paid the price.
Mm-hmm. You probably looked pretty good to them when they saw you coming in too.
If they ever said anything nasty about the Army Air Corps before, they sure didn't. When we were taking them out of combat, I'll tell you that. They were happy to be going home.
Well, let's talk about then movement to the European theater. You shipped out when, and what was your destination?
We went from Lawson Field, Fort Benning, Georgia. This was early May of 1943. I think it was May the 1st or May the 2nd. We flew to North Africa by way of what they call the Southern Route. And that was leaving Morrison Field at West Palm Beach, going down to Berinquin Field, Puerto Rico, which is still there, I understand. And from there to St. Lucia, Trinidad, Atkinson Field, British Guiana, Belém, Brazil, Natal, Brazil, Ascension Islands, where, by the way, it has the highest tide in the world, 29 feet, I think, is the tide at Ascension Islands, Dakar, French West Africa, and then Marrakesh, Morocco. All these are days I'm talking about. I don't know how many days that adds up to. And then we finally wound up at a brand new little place out in the desert called Bergent. I think it was Berguent, which was, as I say, it was 40 miles from Uzu, which was 65 miles from Iran, which was 25 miles from Algiers. So that you know exactly where it was.
And you stayed there a few months, and what were your missions in North Africa, Foster?
Basically, hauling these seaborne troops we picked up in Marrakesh almost every day after the air crews had been there about a week or so, maybe 10 days. Then we flew back to Marrakesh because the seaborne troops were the seaborne troops of our squadrons in our group. So we'd fly over every day, and we would pick them up for about a week. In other words, we'd fly over in the morning, eat lunch there. By that time, they'd had the plane loaded up, and then we'd fly them back. And that was one good thing about North Africa. The flying weather was good. You could plan on it being like this every day, and it was.
And wide open.
And wide open.
You were preparing for, were you training for the eventual
We were training
second
ultimately for the invasion of Sicily. That was our so-called baptism of fire. But in between times, we were either not flying or we were flying into Algiers and Iran and the other ports to bring supplies. By that time, I've got the exact timetable, but the war was moving west awfully fast in North Africa. It started out, over in Alexandria and Cairo, and then came to Benghazi and Tripoli and Tunis, and we finally wound up being stationed in Kairouan, Tunisia, which was about 100 miles south of Tunis. But by this time, George Patton had arrived on the scene. He was getting all the news in the Stars and Stripes because he had built a reputation in World War I, and even during the war he had quite a big mouth. He could back up everything he said, though. So he came in, and his army, I think he was in command of the 7th Army in North Africa. I think I'm wrong on that. But anyway, he got over there and made short work of doing the cleanup work in North Africa, so that we could then concentrate on going into Sicily and then to Italy and moving up the mainland of Italy into the mainland of Europe, or Central Europe.
Describe tell us about the airborne drop into Sicily when that invasion took place.
The first night was very uneventful. There was flak and machine gun fire. We as a group, I think, lost one plane. At that time we had only 13 or 14 planes in the squadron, so there were about 55 planes out, I think about. And I believe we lost only one plane. Second, July 11th, was something different. It was a very active night. Our own Navy apparently got confused. Every story or every book I've ever read about the invasion of Sicily has a new twist on exactly what happened, so I don't know actually what did happen. The United States Navy claimed they saw a Ju-88 in the formation. It was a German ship. I think they got trigger happy, and everybody started shooting, and then they all started up because they probably thought in one ship, well, if this guy's shooting at him, maybe I better shoot too. Maybe I'm wrong. But that was before we had the stripes, that I showed you, and so on the plane. So maybe, I don't know. I don't want to point my finger at anybody, but it was bad. We lost that night only one plane. But we were lucky, very, very lucky, because it was just like a hailstorm that you've never seen before.
Describe the stripes and the purpose.
Well, the idea was to drop the paratroops behind the lines, and assuming they were working, hopefully with some people in the underground, they would go in and just, it was all supposedly a sneak attack, but that particular second night in Sicily was no sneak attack because the whole southern half of Sicily was lit up like it is outside right now with the flak and machine gun fire, the tracers, so on. But that was the purpose of it, was to go in and take the important spots with all the anti-aircraft and actually get a movement going there so the ground troops could land on the beaches and start the war effort going.
And the stripes were to identify American aircraft?
No, they didn't have stripes on the planes at that time. They had them for the Normandy
D-Day,
invasion.
okay.
But all I'm doing here really is trying to understand myself why the American Navy opened up on us like they did. I suppose they were confused. It was probably for them, like us, it was their first time in battle, and everybody was gun happy. I don't know, but anyway, I know it was frightful.
That would certainly be the fog of war.
Yeah.
And, that has always existed and always will, probably.
Yeah.
So your squadron lost one aircraft?
Only one plane. John Stiles was the pilot.
Anything else you want to describe about the invasion of Sicily?
No, not really. About a month, well, it was just about almost exactly a month later,